Welcome, welcome. My name is Mads, your host. You can find me at JK Madigan. It's down there. But we are back with another bonus episode of the Top Shelf. I feel like it's been a little while since I've done one of these, but I know I've done them. My schedule's very scattered. I don't pay too much attention. But this one's a long time coming that I've been wanting to talk to for a little while, and then schedules got crazy, and I'm terrible at responding to people. So we are, yeah, you laugh because I did it to you for like how long? Um,
Oh, I did the same thing though.
yeah, that's fair. So a little while ago on the top shelf, we played Iron and Lies by this gentleman here. I'll have him introduce himself in a second, but it was something else. I was stoked to be able to play it for nothing more than I wanted to dig into what is a tabletop game without dice. But we did it, and it was frickin' awesome. And now I get to chat with him. So, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you've created. I mean, we know Iron and Lies, but what you do, where we can find you, things like that. Yeah, and then we'll just kind of start chatting. It's a casual thing, so don't worry too much about it.
Okay. Well, My name is John. I think most people on the internet know me as Bats with two T's. I write games. That's about all I do right now. Thankfully, it's a very nice job. I've made a couple. Iron and Lies, I think, was one from last year, and then I have Dot Dungeon, which was a kickstarted last year and is coming out soon.
Yes.
And I got a bunch of other stuff that's kind of, I try to release like one thing a month, so it's kind of hard to keep it all in order sometimes. But yeah, you can find me on Itch or my website, which is just nerves, nerves.store. That will have everything that I've made and it's available now. But yeah.
Perfect. No, I'm super excited. It's funny that you mention Dot Dungeon because we're subject to how my brain tangents things, but uh, I have yet to get you on a show. I wanted you on for Iron and Lies to play, but it didn't work out. If I end up running Dot Dungeon, because I have it pre-ordered and I'm super excited for it to show up, um, is that something you'd be interested in?
Yeah, I think the main reason why I couldn't join for Iron and Lies is just my living situation was not ideal to be doing, talks or doing shows or anything like that. So now that I've moved and everything's settled, I would be a lot more open to running or even just playing in a game, my game or another game. It doesn't really matter to me.
Perfect. No, that's what I want to hear because we have the the rule, and I promise that it's not a power trip, but I feel like I still think it is sometimes. But I like getting the designers in the role of a player in their own game, run by somebody else, because
Nice.
I think it shifts perspectives a little bit.
Oh yeah.
It changes how you can talk about the game. So if I can help it, I never like the designer to run their own stuff because they know it in and out. I have to read through that and interpret it. In
Yeah.
fact, I ran Necronautilus, and Adam Vass wasn't on that episode. But when I did it, I did the interview with him, and I was explaining how some of the stuff works, and he was like, "Wait, you did it that way?" I'm like, "Is that not how it was supposed to go?" And he's like, "No, the rule was supposed to be this." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I didn't read it like that. We played it this way." It still worked great. The game was a blast, but it's really interesting to like. I don't know the rules. I'm reading them week to week. Um,
Yeah.
with Iron and Lies, it's a beautiful book. It is it's slick as hell. And I played I played it once. I read through the whole thing word for word because this book is so much fun to read, almost as
Thank you.
just a book in itself. And like, where did you get what inspired this? What brought this to be? Because there's a lot of, I feel like there is a lot of uh, casual ties to like actual Fey concepts and things in there, but I don't know what part of that is yours and what part of that's research. Like,
Well, I guess funny story. The idea for the book itself, or at least the game itself, whatever you want to call it, came from a friend. They had just messaged me like out of the blue, and they were like, I want to make a game, called Iron and Lies, and those are your stats. And then I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And I was talking to them about it, and then I was like, it'd be cool if they weren't stats and like those were literally the only things you could do. And they weren't like super into that. So I was like, I'll take that, and go my way, and then you go your way. And I don't think theirs ever came out or they ever finished it. So, but as for like the Fae stuff, a lot of it might be based in, like Fae in mythology and different kind of like historical things, but I didn't do any research. So any of those connections have just been like picked up through like shows that I've watched or books that I've read. Because I'm sure there's a lot of stuff in there that does match up with other people's idea of, Fae. But I tried to purposely, at least for writing this, to not look anything up just so I could try to make something that was my own. But like I said, I watch a lot of TV, so a lot of that stuff's probably kind of seeped in
No, that's
just by the natural osmosis.
that's seriously impressive though. Like having read through it, the fact that I don't know, my one of my friends is super into Fae, and like she does a lot of delving into like the Fae Wild and all of kind of the history there when we play 5e, and it's really fun to see something that is dedicated just to the Fae. Ironically, I still have yet to be able to get my friend group to play it like in real life, but
Dang.
it happens. Um, but yeah, it was a blast to read, and I've recommended it to a number of people just as a supplement to their own understanding of the Fae for things like running 5e or running these things. Because as much as it is its own game in its own right, because it lacks mechanics, and maybe that's part of its charm, because it lacks that like dice and number structure, it plays or reads more like a book. Um,
Yeah, I was actually, it's funny that you mentioned that. I was actually talking to somebody, because I talk to a lot of different people in Discords and stuff about game design, and they have been on this big kick about like not making any more systems and focusing mainly on supplemental stuff. And so I've just been thinking like, oh, it might be fun to go back to Iron and Lies and strip what little mechanics even there might be in it and kind of broaden it to be more like something like the Fungi of the Far Realm book, if you've read that one.
I
That's
have
like all supplemental stuff.
I'm going to stop you on a personal note there because I was looking at that 2 days ago and I almost
Ooh,
bought it.
oh, it's so pretty.
Is it just it looks like at surface level it looks like a botanist's catalog.
It is 100% that. Yeah, it's like all just like fantastical plants and these beautiful illustrations and this wonderful writing. It's
Uh,
it's it's one of the books that I think about a lot whenever I sit down to write anything, just because it reads like a book more than like a game, and that's just really special, I think, to find.
yeah, it is. It is, and it's I think part of the reason that when I was so excited about this book when I read it, I that was the first thing I pitched to people. I'm like, no, you don't have to play it. Just go read the book. Just go have it in your life. Just read this thing because it's so
Well, that means a
cool.
lot.
Yeah, no, and it's very genuine. Like I was stoked for it, and every one of the players had a blast doing it. We um your game runs very conducively to how I run games, which is to say I don't think about it much beforehand. I have
Yeah,
a
that was definitely a big thing for me. That's 100%. Most times when I go to the table to run a game, I bring like a little notebook or a laptop with a blank notepad, document, and then I just pretend like I have everything prepared and just let people go wild with it.
Yeah, when it depends on the group I'm running for if I want to come across as that. Sometimes I'll just bring a stack of sticky notes and I'll just write things down as I go and I'll just stick them down. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is a thing
That's a
that I
good
got to get
idea.
back to. Um,
I got to get some more sticky notes now.
oh, I love sticky notes. There's an episode that I ran a little while ago that people have made jokes in the TPK Discord about with the fact that I have a wall of sticky notes when I make my games of all different colors. So reds are enemies, greens are treasures, yellows are story points, and then
That's great.
NPCs are blue. And then I can just take the sticky notes off and I can just put them wherever they need to change, so I can
That's
keep order
genius.
of stuff. It's the only way I can actually plan because I don't plan anything. I'm like an improv solely dude. So Iron and Lies worked great. It's it's set up for that. I think I started the story. We played the whole thing in two key portions. We did the court case at the Unhouse, which the rules about the Fey court being a literal kind of a literal iteration of court proceedings in the most abstract way possible is probably my favorite part of the book. The rules of the rules of the Fey laws are my favorite. And then we ended up getting to win the favor of the Archfey at the top of what was the place? It was look at there. Where is it? The House of Moods.
Oh yeah, the big
bathhouse.
the big building. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yep, that bathhouse is lots of fun to traverse through. I had to
Yeah,
lean into the. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say that's like one of the only, I guess like mini adventures, whatever you want to call them, in the book that I didn't get to play test, because it was written by somebody else. They wrote the encounters for that one, and it kind of came in a little late. So I just had to, throw it in the book and be like, oh, hopefully, I trust your writing. Hopefully, this will work out when somebody plays it.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm glad you got to do it.
Yeah, I touch everything loosely, but it worked really well. I mean, I'm such a sucker for Spirited Away specifically as far as Ghibli movies.
Yeah.
Or Ghibli movies. That was lots of fun to kind of visit, especially considering the art in the book is super charming, but the fact that all of the goblins have this very David Bowie reminiscent kind of outfit and thing that's going on with them made it way fun to just put a whole bunch of goblins in a bathhouse.
Yeah, they're my favorite. The goblins are my favorite by far.
Yeah, goblins are great. This is the second game I've played apart from outside of standard fantasy stuff that paints goblins in a very, very different visual. Like goblins always kind of have this small kind of, crotchety, mischievous thing, and they kept the mischievous, but they got rid of all of the small and crotchety about them, and the green and all of the rest of that. Painted them as people, which was lots of fun. Then the other one was Morkborg. They just make goblins horrifying. Terrible
oh God,
things.
yeah.
They're bad.
Pretty Fey still though, just
yeah,
just apocalypse Fey, yeah.
Apocalypse Fey. I'm gonna build it. I need to write a game that's just that now.
Yeah, 100%.
That's its own prompt. How long did something like this take you to write? What was the turnaround on that?
Oh gosh, my writing workflow is a little mismatched. Usually I'll write like a big chunk of it. So like everything from like the introduction, like through to like where the potions and the magic started, I probably wrote over like just a night, like really fast, unedited, just try to get it down as quick as possible. And then after I get like a big chunk, I usually take it into like the layout program, and that's where like the actual writing is done, because I have to edit all my horrible typing and my bad sentences into something good, and then I find out what the book needs to get finished. So usually it's not done, like the writing isn't done until like the whole thing is done. And it took maybe, I'd say about a month. I think like most of October I spent doing that and getting the art done for it. So I'd say about a month.
Okay.
To get it all together.
That's not bad considering that it's just all text.
Yeah, no, like it's kind of like what you were talking about, how sometimes it's just like a fever dream, and you just you just write for a long time and get a whole bunch of words down at once, and that's kind of how it was when I found like what I guess like the voice of the book, because it's definitely it's not my speaking voice in any kind of way. As soon as I kind of latched on to that sort of Fey voice, I just kind of let it run until the batteries were out, I guess.
Yeah. No, and it ran. I really wanted to explore Bright. I think Bright is the most interesting concept in the book to me. It just the kind of ever-consuming end of the Feywild is what it feels like. It's the bridge where it meets the material.
Yeah, that's oddly enough, that is like that was an article I had written Because I used to do a lot of writing on Reddit, just like writing like 1,000 word things about D&D, different ideas. And that was one of those I wrote maybe 2 or 3 years ago, maybe even longer. And it was great to finally be able to like revisit it and have a reason to like kind of fix it up and put it into a book, because I really like the idea too.
Yeah, no,
I don't know, it's just terrifying.
and it's brilliant too because people like you see Fae as usually the words that come with it are like beautiful, magical, and chaotic, and then you get this awful, just consuming, almost eldritch end of the plane where things are being just taken. Um,
Yeah.
and it holds the same energy and it holds the same voice, so there's no reason that it wouldn't make sense that you have these like really dark spots in the Feywild. I'm actually curious now. I'm touching on something that you just mentioned. You used to write a whole bunch of articles and things on D&D. Is that your was that your first foray into TTRPGs, or how long was that? What's your
Yeah. So I used to, you mentioned your friend who's really big into like the 5e kind of
Mm-hmm.
lore. I used to be like that, but for 3.5, because that's when I started playing in like high school, was for 3.5 edition.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like super into the lore. I was like big onto the monster manuals and the all the different books. I loved every bit of it. I probably have a lot of that stuff like lodged in my brain somewhere. But when I got on Reddit, I started to find some of like the OSR blogs, who people who just wrote and disregarded that entirely, and I was like, oh, you can do that? That's crazy. And that's when I started writing things on Reddit, trying to get as far away, from the Wizards of the Coast lore as I could. And that was probably, it was like 2015, I think, when I started doing that. And I think that would probably be considered the first time I actually like wrote things for games and to be used in games. So that was like 6 years ago. Dang,
Very nice.
that makes me feel old.
I I feel like just last year made me feel old. I was fine until the
That's
world
fair.
stopped.
Gosh,
Um,
yeah.
what just as a general question, what do you think pulls people? Because I feel like a lot of people in this community that me and you are a part of, and just all of the indie games and building stuff that is heavily abstracted in some cases to 5e and kind of what is established still is the norm for tabletoping. Um, what do you think pulls people away from that? What?
Hmm.
Why is this growing so fast?
Yeah, that is a good question. I don't know if it's anything like me. It's just sometimes you just need permission. And like for me, the permission was seeing, the blogs that are kind of dead now, but seeing other people write these articles that were crazy and knowing that, oh, you don't have to basically like follow the rules. So maybe it's like this exponential kind of growth where the more people who write these games, the more people who get to see it, and the more people who also feel like they now have like this permission. Because sometimes it's just really hard to like break away from what is popular or what
Mm-hmm.
is, what you know. It's hard to think about things you don't know. So when you get to see that and you're like, oh, that's really interesting, it kind of, I don't know, just sparks that fire in you to create something like that of your own, I think.
Yeah, no, it's I got started into indie stuff because of Morkborg. Not because I wanted to play it and I saw it and went, "Oh man, that's cool," but somebody showed it to me as just a picture. And they're like, "This is a really neat thing." And I'm like, "Oh shit, that's a game." Um, and bought it like a coffee table piece. And as I started reading through it and the fact that it is so entirely its own thing, uh, I think I think what D&D lacks, or D&D, call it the Cthulhu Pathfinder, whatever you want to use there, and people fight me on this sentence, but what I think they lack is voice. Um,
Yeah.
not in a bad way. Like it gives people lots of room to kind of play their own story out in the world, and you get a lot of, but you don't get the writer in it. And all of this
Hmm.
tabletop stuff that's coming out is 100% the writer. It's because at that point, with some of these more niche things, like for example, if we take Iron and Lies, Iron and Lies is one story, basically. It's a bunch of folks from regular time getting lost in the Feywild and trying to make their way back home. That's the start and the finish. Your story is in the
Hmm.
middle of it, and you're playing, this could be different 100 different ways, but it is one tale, um, written in a very confined boundary, quote unquote. And that's really neat from a personal perspective because I've read some. I was looking through Exalted Funeral the other day because I get most of my stuff there. I've started branching out because I'm learning more sites, but like Exalted Funeral, for all of my physical stuff, I found one that was a Blades in the Dark um, like rule set, but it was a very specific story of like this uh, like royalty trying to basically lay claim to their deed of their funds and things, and they're very like the beginning of the first page of it writes with basically saying whoever's playing this royalty, because they have all of these like very specific people, at least class like items that you have to pick from, whoever's playing this royalty has to be a team player at the table, because part of their whole shtick and part of the way that this table plays out is they are very naive. Like you're playing as new royalty coming into all of this stuff, and you're
Oh,
discovering the
okay.
world through your party and trying to figure out, how the world works as you go on this adventure. But you kind of have to put yourself in certain mindsets for these more niche games where you don't have to as much for D&D. You can just self-insert yourself and go.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's interesting. I think I agree um, about 100% on that because one thing that always kind of made me interested in reading like the Powered by the Apocalypse kind of style games is they always felt less like a game and more like almost like a television pitch. It's like you're pitching like what if you were this person doing this thing, and it kind of made it um, focus less on the game and more about the role play. I think a lot of
yeah.
people, or at least me, sometimes you just want to play a character, and sometimes you want to make that character, but sometimes it's fun to be given a character, and role play as that character. And I think that might be part of the almost like you say the strive towards more of these indie games is more people want to find new characters to play as that they maybe normally wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, I agree with that. It broadens your scope a little bit because if you're building the character and you know their ins and outs, you, I mean, you're just playing through the experience. But if you're given a character, you have to learn those ins and outs and almost kind of communicate with the space that you're given, to
Hmm.
make it work with you. And you make it unique by being that character, but
Yeah.
you do have to do some kind of fitting into the space in there, which is cool. Uh, are you familiar with Electric Bastion Land?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
okay, so that is and still will remain probably for the foreseeable future my all-time favorite game as far as independent stuff. Well, actually, just in general. And it's part of that reason is I've played it 4 or 5 times now, and every time is so unbelievably different, and everybody enjoys it every time, even though you are put in exactly what we were saying. You are given incredibly specific roles, some of which are so
Yeah.
abstract that it's like, I don't know what this means, but I'm going to interpret it and make it a thing. Like, tactiliatrix is not a word, but that's now the failed career you were. Here,
Yeah. That's
use
my
this
job now.
information. Yeah. It's like, so there's, yeah, I think there's a lot of that coming out in like Excommunicado is another good example where it's very specific to what you were. I've got a couple coming up and back, and there's benefits to both things. I think it's like,
Yeah.
but you
Definitely.
either play in the genre or you play in the character space.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah. I think
some
that's a good distinction. I think. Yeah.
and some can do both, but most games definitely lean one way or the other, which is neat. And Iron and Lies is very much. Oh well, now that I think of it, I don't know that. I
Yeah.
don't
I
know
don't
that
know
it's
if
really
that's exactly
either.
character. Yeah, because it's. I always pictured it as like you playing as yourself, and that sort of being the fun. But like I know that anytime that I've ran it for people, they've made their own character up, and it
Hmm.
wasn't ever like a fan fiction thing. But yeah, I'm not sure. But you mentioned Electric Bastion Land. I think another game that does that really well is Troika, because it does the same thing with its backgrounds instead of the failed careers. Except instead of doing, Electric Bastion Land, it's pretty gonzo too. Um, Troika kind of leans into like the like sci fantasy sort of thing. So you get like equally gonzo things that are like from all these different like dimensions, sort of like I don't know if you know about Planescape, the old D&D setting.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's sort of like if the Planescape setting was remade now as an indie game. But it has that same sort of thing that I'm always fascinated with, is being given a character that has like, stuff to latch onto. But
Yeah.
yeah, that you talking about Electric Bastion Land just made me think about that.
No, that's super. I actually have. I just got a copy of Troika and I think a Troika supplement, Acid Death Fantasy, a
Yeah,
little
that's a good
while
one.
ago that are both sitting on my shelf. I haven't cracked them yet, but I see Troika
I
and
think you'll dig them.
I'm excited. I'm genuinely excited, and part of the reason for that is they discuss, or I keep hearing people calling it like the most hackable uh,
Yeah, that's
system that
true.
exists, and I don't know what that means, and I'm excited to
Oh,
see what that
well, I
translates to.
guess as an example, somebody made a Seinfeld hack of it
I saw that.
where you
It was
play as the Seinfeld characters.
oh, it was out of stock when I went to get it, but
Oh
Troikafeld
no.
is just the most bonkers thing I've heard.
Yeah, that's the best example I think for how far you can really push. 'Cause it's a really simple system. It's one of those things that I'm just jealous that I never thought of it until till they made it, because I don't know, it's really good. You could make an infinite amount of characters and never get bored with just making up the random stuff they can do, or
Yeah.
stealing from TV shows like Seinfeld.
Yeah. Yeah, do you play video games much? Or
Maybe not a lot, but I try to keep up as much as
okay,
I can.
fair enough. So I got into, I think this is indicative of my personality, I guess, because I got really into leaning into indie games and things as I got further into wanting to play games. And there's probably something similar there that I could dissect. But the roguelike genre of video
Mm.
games are one of my absolute favorite um, games because it's the concept of we're going to play through, it's going to be a quick run for like 40 minutes, and that's the whole story, and then I die or I win, and then I start over.
Hmm.
Like, but you don't start over with any loss of experience. Like you have knowledge of the world now,
Yeah.
and you have knowledge of the mechanics, and you understand the games and things like Bastion Lands and Troika. It sounds like, and even Iron and Lies. I think if I played through this a second time, all of a sudden I, as a player, have an expanded amount of information on the system that I didn't understand before having played it. Now, if I play it through again, I'm going to make different decisions or I'm going to try to do different things, not because I'm like deliberately trying to branch out of my space, but because now I'm keyed in on the clue, on the joke. And that's
Yeah.
really cool from a
Yeah.
perspective of like Iron and Lies specifically. I didn't tell any of the players how the lying system functioned. I told them that it exists, but like the bartering system of like we can
Mm.
just swap whatever, be that emotions or what have you. Um, it took them a minute to lean into that, and I think the system or the session went really really cool because as players they didn't know. So you're fresh into the Feywild as a player too,
Hmm.
and then it starts to
Yeah.
connect. And then if I took that same party back, all of a sudden now they get the joke. It's like, well, now let's see what we can do with that.
Yeah. That would be fascinating. Yeah. That I've been thinking about that sort of idea of like what is like replayability for a role playing game, and I think
Hmm.
that might be the main thing that I'm leaning towards, is that you get to mess with the system and you get to be like another character, especially with something like Electric Bastion Land or Troika that has like tons of characters that you get to play as, and each one's
Hmm.
going to give you like this different experience. Because I think if I were to make like my ultimate game, most of it would probably just be character creation. I think that's what a lot of people really like. You see, even when people talk about, fifth edition, mostly they talk about their character they make. And I think if somebody made a game that was just the character creation part, I think a lot of people would be into that just because that is, I think where a lot of the fun
Yeah.
people find in games, new and old, just getting to try all the different random things they can get.
Correct me if I'm way off base, but to me, at least, and the conversation that me and the players had after the game, Iron and Lies is not all that far off from what you would mechanically need to build a game that is about creating a character. Because one of the things that we talked about was you bring a character in with this perception of who they are. They know who they are. They know what they're about. They already have, the is a side tangent, the items in their pocket and the fact that that's physical stuff that you should have around you is one of my favorite like inventory mechanics. It's like, nah, can
Oh
you carry
gosh.
it? Is it on you literally? Um, which should have clued me in to just have people play themselves, but everybody likes creating characters. But as you
Yeah.
play through this game and you start to lose sadness, or even even in the case of one of the guys bartered or did something and ended up losing all of his blood. Um,
Oof.
so he was just meandering about like with the party completely bloodless, but he couldn't die because the Fae didn't want him to. So he's just a husk trying to barter for somebody else's blood back. And we had the conversation at the end. What if he didn't get his own back? At the point
Ooh.
that he now has Fey blood because he bartered himself back into a living space, it's like, but are you you when that much of you has been replaced? And in a long campaign of Iron and Lies, the person who ends up on the end, and I guess D&D kind of does this, and a couple other systems where you grow as a character do this, but not in the same kind of extremity that Iron and Lies does, where you start as one thing, you could end as something entirely different. You are not even
Yeah.
close to the same person that you were, and that's not even like character growth because we're making friends and the power of love. It's I am not me, or I don't feel like me in like almost a dysphoric kind of way, and maybe
Yeah.
that's a good thing, but it is all about the the building of a character. You start with one, but the game is you're building that end character almost.
Yeah. I honestly have never thought of it that way, but hearing you say that makes me think about like the whole like ship of Theseus. Rebuilding a ship. Is it
Yeah.
still the same ship sort of thing? That's something I didn't even think about when I was making it. That's I'm always interested when people besides me get to play or run the games because I in my head I just write the thing. I have no idea what it's really about until people actually get to play it.
Mhm.
But that's a really interesting thing. That would be something to I don't know, think about to I don't know, maybe even add some more stuff or figure out exactly how that would work because I haven't gotten to run, with everything being online, I haven't gotten to run like a really long campaign. So all the changes like like the blood, uh I've only gotten to see like over one or two sessions. So that would be really interesting to see like what would happen to somebody. How many things they could keep, if any, on their character sheet by the end of
Mhm.
like, 3, 4, 5 weeks of play.
Yeah, somebody mentioned in the party um cuz the show, and I don't know if you've seen it. No shame if you haven't. But uh, the show functions in two parts. So we play the game. We'll always run a one shot, and then there's always an hour at the end where we kind of recap and we talk about the session and we talk about how it goes. Because we only like all I try to only cast people who have never played it before, so everybody is looking at it with fresh eyes, which is also why I like the designers to play as players. Um, and then those fresh eyes come into this final conversation, and one of the things that was chatted about at the end was the idea that it would be really cool to use this as D&D's Feywild if you played a long-standing D&D campaign. So you take your character, all of their items, everything they have and they know they can do. As soon as they enter the Feywild, you strip every mechanic from the game. You then only use Iron and Lies mechanics, and you start pushing them forward. These people have built a character over the span of a year or two, or however many sessions. They're attached to everything. They have
Yeah,
personal investment in everything they've done to this character. Now, when a Fae goes to barter with them and they say, I want your memory of that person, can they give it up? Like,
that would be really interesting.
like,
That actually makes me think. I think I mentioned this earlier about going back and making it more of a supplement, because that would be really, it would be fun to 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 attach it to other games, like not even D&D. I feel like you could kind of hook it into, I mean, any game that would have a fairy in it, and that could be really fun to see, to make the bargains a lot more intense than just giving up, the pocket watch that you have in your pocket or whatever you're
hmm
carrying with you when you sit to play. That'd be fun to drop on people too, I think, in the middle of a campaign.
yeah, absolutely. Because it causes you, I mean, in the sake of character growth, by the time you walk out of the Feywild, even if you are your same self, you've had to take serious looks about the things that are important to you, the things that
Hmm.
you're willing to give up as a person in that position. And there was lots of fun with that because some people, there were certain things that they were very willing to barter as far as memories or things that it's like, nah, you can have all of the stuff that I don't want anymore because they're holding me back and like they're, bad memories or what have you. We all want to get rid of them. Like there's all
Hmm.
of this little fodder, and then when you get to the gates of the bathhouse. And in order to get in, you guys are having a conversation and trying to figure it out. And the guard goes, I want his gumption. And he's been the real
Ooh.
plucky character the whole game. And it seems innocuous enough until it's gone.
Yeah.
And that's wild to me. Like, it was. The more I talk about it, the more I'm getting back into the session. I'm just like, oh, it was so good because it was a thought experiment beyond what most people see character growth to be because you're forced to only use the growth of your character.
Yeah, that's always been, like, I feel like, above all any of the games or things that I've written, Iron and Lies is the closest to like how I run games. Like even in D&D where there's, all these numbers and all these stats and equipment and everything, a lot of times I just like to offer like a bargain, like a devil's bargain. Be like, would you give up this thing to do? Or like if they ask, oh, can I do this ridiculous thing? I always ask like, well, what are you willing to pay for it? And that's just always been something I've done in a game because that's what I've always found to be the most fun. And like the players that I play with, that's what they enjoy the most, as well. And I don't know. It's weird that whenever I wrote Iron and Lies, I wasn't really thinking about that, but that, has sort of found its way
It did. Yeah.
into it. That's great.
I mean, if that's your MO, that's the whole book. Like that's 100% your voice
Yeah,
then. That's super
basically.
cool. Um yeah, I don't know. There's so many good things to talk about cuz one of the players as well uh they had they're like I want to take just the character creation at the very beginning where it asks about all of your names and your age and your
Mm,
appearance, and then hopes, ghosts, dreams, nightmares. Um, the way that a character is built asks a lot more than just what are you good at in the
hmm.
best of ways that I think ought to be converted to more systems. And I see a lot of
Yeah.
indie games doing similar things. I've seen a number of games that I've read through that it's like, yeah, tell me about your flaws and your weaknesses and things as opposed to just rolling dice on it. But this one, at least from the ones that I've read, not disparaging any if there are better ones out there, but the ones that I've read, like this is probably my favorite experiment into forcing you into all the minutia of a character. Um,
Yeah. I was definitely inspired by those games. Especially a lot of the, belonging outside belonging games, that like Avery Adler, um, wrote, because those don't have any dice either. They're all about exchanging, tokens basically that you earn from doing, different things. And so I was definitely inspired by those games when I was doing that. And I just remember when I was writing, I was just thinking like, what would a Fae not like what would a Fae like value in a human, but like what could be considered like a tool? Like what's something, I feel like to make something kind of alien and weird, I tried to think like if this creature was going to break down a human into its parts, what would it pragmatically think was the most important? So like while writing it, it was definitely more of just like almost felt a little evil to make the character sheet. Like here's all the things you're going to lose probably. Here's all the things the Fae are going to want from you for even like the smallest thing. But I definitely could see it. I would love to see somebody's take on it, like switching it into like a game like D&D or any other game really, to see if they kept like the same tone or what they added and what they removed from like the list of different things. So I think the names are my favorite um, from all of them. Just being able to think back and try to be like, oh, what are all the names I've been called in my life? Watching players try to dig in and come up with all the nicknames. That was always, I think, the funnest part for me in character creation. Besides the pockets, there's a lot of funny stories with people trying to shove like the most ridiculous things they have into like their jean pockets to make it fit into the game. But I think the names are probably my favorite.
Yeah, the names is it's fun too because the names I think is something of all of those that most people don't think about. Because you get the one name, that's what you refer to yourself as, and then what everybody else calls you or thinks of you,
Hmm.
or things like that. That yeah, we hear, but we don't acknowledge them in the same way. So calling upon, you know, being called, you know, honey by my wife, and then all of a sudden that is gone is interesting. Um,
Yeah, you never really think about. I've always had a very strange relationship with like names. Like when I was, this is, I don't know if this is getting super deep or not. It's not. It doesn't seem very
no, go
deep to
for
me.
it.
But when I was younger, my name is John, but there was a lot of Johns in my family. It's a very common name. Like my grandpa was named John, my uncle's named John. So my family gave me a nickname, and that was like my name for a really long time, basically. And so growing up, I always had to correct like teachers, like, oh no, my name's not really John. You have to call me this instead. And so like names, I don't know, like whatever people called me, I never really had like a huge attachment to it. And I don't think it really was until this game and playtesting it with people where I was like, oh yeah, some people actually really care about certain names that they have.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just me that's maybe I'm the Fae, maybe I'm the weird one who doesn't have that sort of emotional connection to it. But no, it's always been really interesting to see. Like I didn't even think about the nicknames that you could have between a partner. Um, I don't know. That's one thing that I've always loved about this game is I feel like I learned so much about the people around me that I just you don't normally think about.
Yeah.
And that this is really fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, people are complex, and what you built was a game that extrapolates on that and breaks people down almost in like a medical diagram of the complexities of what make a person. If we're swapping story for story, I actually relate to that quite a bit because you got into, I mean, D&D lore and stuff. You've played. Are you familiar with the Dragonlance setting or Greyhawk?
Yeah, I read some of the books in
Okay,
high school. Yeah.
so my first name is Karuman.
Okay.
Like that,
Okay.
my dad named me after Karuman Majir.
Huh.
Um, and
So your dad's a huge nerd
oh
too.
yeah, like my dad has a whole room dedicated to D&D. He's more into board
Oh
games and
man,
stuff now, but he runs
my
two
dad too.
campaigns a
Yeah.
week and like it's a whole thing. Um, and that name, because it is a fictional character that the vast majority of normal society doesn't know like by name, and they're like, "Oh, that's rad." It turns into, "Wait, how did you say that?" or "How did you pronounce that?" or "How is that spelled?" or like I'm going to approximate it because what I heard was Carlman, and we're going to put an
Hmm.
L in the middle of it, like Carmen, but Carl is the start of it, and then that runs forward. And then some people just started calling me Carl, or some people didn't call me that at all because it was too much effort to try to figure out. Because I was very proud of it and I wanted to correct people on it. So it was like people started nicknaming me other things, and then I got tired of correcting people, so I just went by Jack for years. because I was kind of sick of it. And it's like I have a lot of relationships with like dozens of names
Huh.
because nobody ever could figure mine out, which I don't know why. It's not all that difficult of a name.
Yeah,
It's
it
just
doesn't. I mean, maybe that's just because I've read the books, so the name's a bit more familiar. But yeah, it doesn't seem like a very difficult name.
I think for most people it's the abstraction from Carmen. It's just close enough to Carmen that when I try to say it, it takes
Yeah.
15 times for that to click. But um yeah, no, I relate to that hard actually. The names are super important, and we take
Yeah.
a lot of them for granted. But
Yeah, they're super weird too. Just the fact, the idea that somebody can just give you a name because they don't understand your actual name. That's wild to me still to this day. I'm really glad that I have a very simple, it's just John,
yeah,
and it's there's nothing to really mix up there, but it's still weird because I was always people always thought it was short for Jonathan, and I always had to be like, nope, it's just John. Like I know you're making a joke, but like it doesn't mean anything to me.
yeah,
You're giving me somebody else's name now, but maybe I could put that on my list now. So
there you go. Yeah,
trade that
it's
away.
true. Yeah, true or not, a name is provided, a name is yours. I mean, even Mads, what I go by in the tabletop community now, which I
Hmm.
adore to death. I, I am gonna stick around with that one for a while, and I don't know why it sunk in the way that it did, but that was given to me because my original Twitch handle was JK Madigan. And there's a whole bunch of different names from different characters that I enjoyed that I kind of blended together to make that. And then I got into the TPK Discord where I run the top shelf, and like somebody shortened it, and I didn't even realize they shortened it. I thought they were like saying I legit thought they were saying I was mad, or like in context it didn't make sense. I'm like, what is that? And then they used it again, and I'm like, oh, oh, that's me. And it was so endearingly provided. Shout out to Meg, but so endearingly provided that it's just stuck. And I don't know. There's context even to how something is given to you, whether or not it's going to be a good thing or
Hmm.
not. Even if it's not a derogatory or a complimentary term, just a word, no matter how arbitrary,
Hmm.
is going to have a different meaning.
Yeah, and I think that brings up another thing uh, to keep on with the words, I guess. Being online for most of our lives, growing up, I assume you're roughly the same age as me. I assume. I have no idea. But, a lot of
25.
the
Yeah.
people, yeah, a lot of the people in our generation, you grow up having, I don't know how many screen names I had as
Hmm.
a teenager going into high school and even into college, all those names, I think eventually people stick to one, but still like there are some people who know me as like old screen names from years ago, and they still call me that. Even people I know like IRL, they still call me these old names, and it's pretty interesting how uh, I would be interested to I guess see in like a modern retelling of some kind of face story how screen names would kind of fit into that. How important those would be to some people. Because like there's some people that they only go by that, and that's all you'll ever know of them.
Yeah.
I don't know. I find names have always just been really interesting to me. I don't know why.
Yeah, it's you've got me thinking on it too, because I started my first screen name, I guess. It was an email, but it was like Carmen Eats Cats, and it was fun because my mom gave it to me because she set up that email when I was a kid, and there was alliteration to it, and I thought it was funny and whatever, and I kept that for like all through high school. I didn't get a new email address or
Dang.
start changing screen names until the year after I graduated because I discovered that it was unprofessional in a business setting. So I got a
Yeah,
different
I could see that being a
right.
problem.
But then 2 years after that, I had stopped associating with that name at all, and everything was fine, and things died down, and I guess it's died down. Like I didn't use the email; it went away. But I was not huge onto the internet until like after I graduated. But my mom bought me a pair of shoes for Christmas. They were bright yellow Converse, and she had ordered them and embroidered on the back heel of both of them was just Carmen Eats Cats in black bold letters. And I have no
Oh
idea
dang.
what composes somebody to use an old Yahoo email address as something endearing to put on the back of a sneaker, but it's like we use like terms for everything. So it's no surprise
Hmm.
that people do that just as intensely to each other most of the time without even
Yeah.
realizing it.
That definitely sounds like a mom a
Yeah.
mom move.
No, my mom's great. She's done all kinds of weird stuff, but that was one of them that just was very entertaining.
That's great.
Ah, goodness. Well, um, tell me a little bit. You mentioned Nerves as a store.
Hmm.
Um, is that in any relation to Project Nerves? Or
Yeah,
okay.
that's kind of like the when I decided to take the leap into like trying to do this full time. I was like, I should probably make something professional and not just be my name. I don't know why I thought that. It just seemed like the right thing to do. So Project Nerves is sort of like my what I hope that becomes like an umbrella that I can like help other people publish books under it as well. But right now it's like only my books, and then I have one other book from a friend. Um, but yeah, that's the what hopefully becomes like a production house company, whatever you want to call it, at some point.
No, that's cool. I love it. I was interested in the fact that that title is different. Because if I mean if we're looking at names, the Y is on all of those. And now have like I'm thinking about it. Um, I'm
Hmm.
I'm also curious. What is that other book? Not yours, but the friends.
Oh, I actually have it right here, believe it or not, because my workspace is pretty small. It's from a friend. I'll just hold it up for a second. It's called Hieronymus. It's
Ooh.
from a friend named Lore. They live in England, and I'm on a Discord with them. And he made this awesome jam that's like taking paintings from the public domain and turning them into games. And I was like, that is entirely up my alley. That's great. And then they made this awesome game with these paintings from Hieronymus Bosch that are like bonkers crazy to look at, turn them into like hex crawls. I think they would honestly be perfect for Iron and Lies to run through them. Um, but it's just a beautiful book, especially for someone like me who's just like super inspired by art. I scroll through Pinterest all the time and just save images that make me want to like write a dungeon or give me a game idea. So having an entire adventure just be this huge painting with a hex grid on it is like I could run a game with that. I don't need to know what the painting's about, or I don't need anything labeled. Just give me the painting and that's I'll make it up as I go along. But it's a really beautiful book, and it's up on the Nerves.store. I've only got a few copies though because it's really expensive to get books from England to here. Uh, but you should check it out. It's really wonderful. And like I said, it would probably go really well with Iron and Lies, just using it as an adventure instead of a game.
Oh, I would love to. I'm always on the lookout for more peculiar or more heavily abstracted from the norm of tabletopping. So Necronautilus, Iron and Lies, Hieronymus sounds like
Hmm.
it. I'll definitely jive with that.
Yeah, I think this is definitely in the same vein as like one of Adam Voss's works, because he's Adam is somebody I actually am working on something with, or they're working on something for me for one of my games because their layout is just like I don't know, their layout work is amazing. So I reached out after I saw Necronautilus and I was like, hey, I will give you money. I need you to lay out some pages for this book. So I'm excited for that whenever that comes in because yeah, Adam's art is just like it's just out there. It's crazy.
Yes. No, absolutely. I had a blast talking to Adam. That was one of another just really good interview. I like the ones where you kind of just dig into. I feel like with yours and with Adam's, we start digging into humanity for whatever reason and the kind of ethos of why games are so important to people. For
Hmm.
things like discovering, the importance of names, even as simple as that is or can seem. Um, for some reason I thought My Body is a Cage was a Project Nerves thing, but
Yeah, that's
oh, it is.
it's not. Yeah, it's not my latest thing. That's actually the thing that Adam. is working on. He's doing a 2-page spread of spells for the expanded version of that I'm doing. But yeah, that's a
Ooh.
game that I released I think in February of this
Hmm.
year.
Beautiful
And I'm
book.
working on, yeah, that I appreciate it. That is like the hardest I've ever worked to make something look good.
Oh, I'm throwing spreads
Uh,
of that up on my Twitter then because I got that, and so I have a roommate who's very interested in my collection. I have like 85 different games on my
Dang.
bookshelf, and I'm obsessive about physical copies of things. And that was one specifically that they have taken off the shelf multiple times just to leaf through and or read like the tables in it and stuff. It's like I have yet to play it, but killer work on that remark alone because it is very much a piece that has had more conversation than it's even had play yet.
Well, I super appreciate it because, like I said, I worked on like the first couple pages of that for like months because I'm not a layout person. And I say that like literally, I was never trained to do it. So I was just like every time I wanted to do something, I was like, okay, time to watch a YouTube video, and
Hmm.
like I watched hours of tutorials just to be able to make like one page. And so I was like, please let somebody at least like this. But I think it's been even more so than Iron and Lies, probably my most bought game. And there was somebody in my Discord channel who was talking about running it, and it made me really excited that people were playing it and liking it.
Yeah,
Because I think it's my
absolutely.
favorite, at least right now.
Well, I mean, if that one's your favorite above Iron and Lies, to which I hold such high praise, I'm gonna have to go check it out and actually run a couple. But thank you so much for coming and hanging out and chatting and stuff and making
Yeah, it was fun.
cool shit that I get to dig into. I'll definitely be in touch because like I said, I am very excited for Dot Dungeon, and I'm very excited for Dot Dungeon, which is its own conversation that we don't have time for on this particular episode. But the fact that you're
Hmm.
releasing it with its own soundtrack, that
Yeah, um, I love making music. I don't know if I'm good at it. Like that's another thing that I've never been, trained to do, but I just like making it. Like I don't know music theory. I just have like a little MIDI keyboard, and I'm like, oh, this sounds good. Let's do that. Um, but I did one for like a game a long time ago, and so for Dot Dungeon, I was like, I should try to do that again. So yeah, I'm excited for that. I've been waiting for that. Like I'm waiting for art to come in to be able to print it, and I'm just like waiting. Every day I'm hoping I get the email that has the art in it so I can finally get this thing in physical form.
yeah, well, when it comes out and things, if I do end up having the time in the schedule to run it, I'll definitely have to let you know because I love stuff that's coming with a soundtrack because from a person who has to stream, having a soundtrack that's not going to get struck and is
Hmm.
relevant to the game is so important in the community from the player's perspective. So that's super cool. But
Yeah.
um, we'll go ahead and kind of round things out. Once again, go ahead and just tell us where we can find you. Plug anything you'd like to plug, upcomings, good projects that have not seen enough that people should buy more, whatever you like, games that you like from other people. I don't mind.
So yeah, I'm John Battle. People know me as Bats online mostly. I write games and other things around games. You can find me. My store is nerves.store. I'm also on itch. That's where a lot of the PDFs for my games are, at least. And I just today actually released this zine project I'm doing. That's like a setting guide to a fantasy city that I've kind of had in my head for a long time. I'm releasing it as a bunch of little zines and then going to put it into a big book, hopefully, after they're all released. And I'm calling it the Unorthodox Setting Guide because it is me very much purposely trying to break all the rules that people say you should follow when writing a setting. So I'm 100% ready for it not to be people's thing, but I'm excited for it. So yeah, you can check that out on itch and follow me on Twitter, all that stuff. I make a lot of Pokemon tweets, which are fun. And yeah, that's about it.
Super cool. I'm actually gonna have to check that out. That harkens back to one of my other loves for Electric Bastion Land and kind of how bizarre the setting is, and just like here's the norm, now break it, and that's so.
Hmm.
Yes, I'm gonna have to go look at that. Yeah, and I am your host, Mads, for all intents and purposes. Though you know lots of my names now. I've bartered those away into the internet.
My
Um,
trick has worked.
right? Yeah, your game is real life. You can find me on Twitter at JKMadigan. You can hang out in the TPK Discord and find me, ask me whatever you like. Come see everybody else's great shows. TPK does all kinds of good stuff. We have games literally every day. TPK is very busy.
Nice.
But yeah, Twitch or Twitter at JK Madigan. You can find me on itch under JK Madigan as well. I have one game up. I keep saying over the last couple of these interviews that I'm working on another one, which I am, but it probably will not be seen until I have another like fit of inspiration where I sit and write the whole thing at once. And then yeah, the next episode coming up, if we're seeing these in sequence, or if we're not, go check them out on YouTube. But I'm playing 17th Century Minimalist next, and then we're going to follow that up by Slayers with the Dust expansion specifically, and we're going to compare that one to D&D,
nice.
which will be lots of fun. I'm actually taking a session that I ran when I first started at TPK that was D&D 5e, and I never got to run a second episode for it. So we're doing the final part of that in a different system. So
that's cool.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to kind of dissect that dichotomy. But yeah, check Bats out, check John out. Go to Twitter if you like his stuff. Tell him you like his stuff. Tell him let him know about his music and his games and things. Everybody needs to know that their stuff's good if it's good, and his stuff is good. But we will see you on the next episode. Thanks for hanging out and listening to me ramble, and we'll see you next time.